Hey, welcome to Sleep Crime Stories. Before we begin, let me ask, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? A quick comment and a subscribe go a long way. It really helps. Now, turn down the lights, and let's begin tonight's case. I eased back into the driver's seat of my cruiser, the heater hissing against the chill that crept through my uniform. My name is Harper, Trooper Mark Harper, and I've done this job for 15 years, but nothing had ever felt as wrong as that night at Twin Pines. Every sound seemed amplified. The metallic click of my seatbelt, the distant rumble of an 18-wheeler on Interstate 84, the soft hum of my dashboard lights. My breath came in slow, deliberate puffs, visible in the pale glow of my spotlight. The rest stop's lone amber lamp cast half-formed shadows across cracked asphalt, making the world feel as if it were about to tear itself apart. I'd been on patrol since 10 p.m., the stretch of highway between mile markers 45 and 52, a notorious corridor for ghost cars, vehicles that showed up on no registers, without license plates, then vanished into the night. I'd learned to treat every unexpected sighting with caution. It was better to assume danger than to dismiss your gut. My car was angled toward the exit ramp, engine idling, lights off, so I could watch for speeding traffic and any odd activity in the rest area. Two dark sedans sat side by side under that single lamp, both unmarked, both empty. No hazard lights, no engine noise. Whoever was inside had slipped away, and I intended to find out where. Sliding out, I unclipped my radio mic. Trooper 14 to dispatch, checking on two unoccupied sedans at Twin Pines rest stop. Will advise. My voice sounded distant, swallowed by the night. I approached the first car, flashlight beams slicing through the darkness. The windows were tinted, but the heat shimmer on the glass suggested nobody inside. I rapped the baton against the driver's door, sharp, demanding. Nothing. Same with the passenger side. I circled to the second car. Identical story. On edge, I crouched to peer under the hood of one. No heat source, no stray fluids, just the dull gray of engine parts. It was as though the cars had materialized out of nothing. A low wind rustled the pines, carrying with it an odd stench, a mix of damp earth, motor oil, and something metallic. My spine prickled. I tapped my Kevlar-clad shoulder. Never let the darkness quiet you, my sergeant's old mantra. So I kept moving. I circled the shuttered gas station, pressing my ear to the corrugated metal door, listening for breathing or movement. I stepped into the gravel beyond, flashlight in one hand, pistol raised in the other. That's when I heard the soft click of a door opening. My heart leapt. I pivoted, weapon up. A figure stumbled out of the station. Young guy, scraggly hair plastered to his forehead, eyes wild. He blinked into my light. "Officer, hey, officer," he panted. His jacket was half-zipped, revealing a sweat-damp t-shirt. "Please, my car, it won't start, I just need a jump." I kept the beam on him, voice calm but authoritative. "Sir, you're on private property. State troopers aren't mechanics. You need a tow." He shook his head, as if the cold was disorienting him. "Please, just check the hood, maybe the battery." His teeth chattered. I let out a slow breath. "Fine, show me." He shuffled to his car and popped the hood with trembling fingers. I knelt beside him, peering at cables and components I barely recognized. He reached in to touch one, flinched at the cold metal. Something was off. His gaze flickered beyond me, toward the woods. That's when I noticed movement through the trees. Just a flicker of shape in the starlit gaps. I spun. There, stepping from beneath a towering fir, came another man. taller, broader, carrying something long in one hand, slung casually at his side. He wore a dark, hooded sweatshirt, the hood pulled low. My flashlight skimmed over the object, a knife, blade glinting in silver arcs. "Stay where you are," I barked, flicking my safety off. The first man froze. Hooded guy paused midway. Then hooded guy dropped the knife into the gravel. It skittered to a halt. Both hands went up. I backed away, keeping my weapon trained on him. Hands where I can see them. My voice echoed against the station walls. I felt the tension coiling in my chest, heat flushing my face. The night seemed to hush, as if holding its breath. "Trooper 14, officer down," came a crackle on the radio. I realized I'd gone off mic. "Dispatch, false alarm. Possible suspects at Twin Pines, 2nd unit requested." They answered almost instantly. Backup was 10 minutes out. In this part of the world, 10 minutes can feel like an eternity. I stepped closer, keeping my aim steady. "Why are you two here?" I demanded. The taller one, knife guy, his eyes were dark hollows. He didn't answer. The shorter one swallowed, glancing between the blade on the ground and the tree line. We just stopped," he muttered. "Needed a stop. On a closed station?" I raised a brow. Silence. I radioed their details and ordered them to kneel. They complied, hands clasped behind their heads. I patted one down. Nothing on him but a cell phone and a lighter. The other yielded a battered flashlight and a pack of cigarettes. No ID, nothing to prove who they were. Before I could cuff them, there was a distant cry, a low, mournful sound that rose from the depths of the woods. A human sound, a sob or wail. Both men froze. I did too. The night pressed in, a pine seeming to lean closer. "Do you hear that?" I whispered, scanning the tree line. The sobbing echoed again, closer now, as if something, or someone, was moving through the underbrush. I lifted my mic. "Back up, hold on, I have an auditory disturbance. Possible victim." They hissed back acknowledgement. I clicked off the mic. "You two," I said, voice cold, "stay here." I holstered my weapon, but kept my hand near the grip. Then I stepped toward the station's rear entrance, flashlight cutting a path into darkness. My boots crunched on gravel as the sobbing swelled, morphing into jagged gasps. Through a narrow gap between two dumpsters I saw them. Two black bags, roughly human-sized, tied off at the top. Next to them, rusted shovel blades sticking out of a heap of churned soil. The sobbing stopped the moment I raised my light. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. My pulse hammered. My radio crackled. "Trooper 14, status." A lifeline? Suspects in custody. Possible evidence behind the station. 2 large bags, looks bad. I swallowed, voice flat. "Request crime scene unit and medical examiner." They confirmed, ETA 5 minutes. I backed away, retracing my steps to the kneeling men. Knife guy's eyes glistened with fear or defiance. I couldn't tell which. I cuffed them both, then settled into my cruiser to wait for backup, replaying every detail in my head. But my mind was already drifting back to those bags. What was inside? Whose lives had ended just yards from a public highway? And why had the station cameras shown no arrival or departure? When the forensic team arrived, I handed over my flashlight and weapon. I watched them sort the scene, unzipping the first bag, chest cavity and arm jutting out, pale and rigid. I turned away, stomach clenched. I'd seen death before, plenty of it. But something about the calculated brutality, the idea of dumping bodies like trash, shattered me. Later, back at the station, I wrote my report with trembling hands. Every word felt inadequate. I locked up my weapon, showered off the grime and the stench that no soap could wholly erase, then sat alone in the briefing room as dawn crept through the blinds. My partner arrived, Sergeant Daniels, eyes heavy with questions. I told him everything. He nodded, silent, handing me a coffee. "You'll need to take some time off," he said quietly. "No one expects you to sleep well after tonight." But sleep was impossible. Even now, weeks later, I can't close my eyes without seeing that lamp's halo over the wasted asphalt, hear the hiss of plastic as bodies shifted in their bags. My nightmares aren't of ghosts or footsteps. I see two faceless men, blurry in the dark, waiting for me to look away so they can vanish. And sometimes, when I'm alone on patrol, I swear I hear a soft rap at the station's back door. Just a gentle knock. No voice, no demand, just the tapping, reminding me that some doors, once unlocked, never truly close. The drive back from the morgue felt endless. Dawn was bleeding through the pines by the time I forced my cruiser onto the on-ramp. Every bump in the road sent jolts through my shoulders, as if I'd strapped the weight of those two bodies to my spine. I radioed dispatch. Trooper 14 returning to post, request relief for paperwork. But my words sounded hollow, already slipping free of my mind before I could register them. By the time I rolled into the station lot, reporters were staging outside the precinct, lights glinting off cameras like hungry eyes. I shut off the engine, let the silence swallow me, then squared my shoulders and stepped out into whatever passed for morning. Inside, Sergeant Daniels met me at the door, his face a mixture of concern and something darker, doubt maybe. "Mark," he said quietly, handing me a thick folder. "They want a statement. Internal affairs, press release, the whole 9 yards. You ready?" I nodded, emptied my lungs in a single breath. "Let's get it over with." We made our way to the interview room, a sterile box of fluorescent bulbs and vinyl chairs. I sat, unclipped my badge and recited the facts. Time of arrival, description of vehicles, interactions with the suspects, discovery of the bodies. I answered every question as though reading from a script I'd memorized months ago, even though I'd lived it less than 12 hours earlier. When it was over, I walked out into the hallway and let the folder drop at my feet, pages fanning across the gray tile like wounded birds. My reflection in the window stared back. Eyes rimmed red, uniform rumpled, tie askew. I could taste adrenaline and cold coffee. I rubbed my temples, then found myself in the locker room, stripping off my gear. The Kevlar vest, folded under my arm, felt heavier than any weight I'd carried in the field. I hung my jacket next to dozens of others, each one marking a colleague who'd left that locker room bruised or broken. I took a long, stuttering breath. Even at 12 years on the force, I'd never had to face this level of horror. The next few days passed in a blur. I filed reports, gave more statements, watched the news cycle churn out pixelated images of that lone lamp at the Twin Pines, reporters calling it the graveyard rest stop. Social media buzzed with conspiracy theories. Bodies from the long-missing truckers case, ritual sacrifice, even urban legends of a phantom trooper luring drivers to their doom. I sat behind my desk with headphones on, trying to drown out the chatter, but every mention drove bone chips deeper into my skull. I started taking notes, timestamps, weather logs, radio traffic, to ground myself in facts. I couldn't afford hallucinations, not on this case. By my third straight overnight shift, I was running on 4 hours of fitful sleep. The precinct was quiet at 11 p.m. A lone dispatcher filled the air with the click of keyboard keys and the dull hum of monitors. I collected my cruiser's keys, rubbed my eyes, and slipped into the driver's seat. Headlights carved pale arcs through the mist as I pulled onto the highway. My mind clung to one unshakable question. How had those cars arrived and left without passing any toll cameras or weighing stations? There was no record of license plates, no cell tower pings. It was like they'd materialized from thin air and left the same way. Interstate 84 at night is a different world. The high beams of semis slice through fog pockets, reflections dancing on wet pavement. I stuck to the shoulder, scanning for anything out of place. Mile 47, nothing. Mile 48, nothing. I radioed dispatch, running a silent check on the lot. Anyone flagged or reported at Twin Pines in the last week? Static. No alerts. I eased the cruiser to a stop at the exit, killed the engine, then stepped out into the chill. Breath billowed from my lungs. A faint plume in the darkness. I didn't dare kill my light. That single lamp might be the only barrier between me and whatever lurked beyond. I approached the station, flashlight sweeping cracks in the doors. Beside the dumpsters, still black as midnight, were fresh tire impressions in the gravel, not mine. I knelt to examine them. Narrow, sports car treads, depressions recently pressed into the soft soil. My pulse thundered. I radioed dispatch. Be advised, I'm observing fresh vehicle impressions at Twin Pines. Please check satellite cams if you can find any. Silence carried back before the dispatcher replied, Copy that, Trooper 14. No visuals on cameras, system offline. My jaw clenched. All right, stand by. I continued my circle, light piercing the fog. Every rustle of pine needles sounded like footsteps. My senses sharpened. Distant hoot of an owl, the odor of damp bark, the mechanical click of my holster. Then, something else. A faint scraping, low and deliberate, coming from beyond the station's north wall. I froze. The sound repeated, like metal dragging over concrete. I swallowed, mind racing. My finger hovered on the mic. Should I call backup or check it myself? Instinct won. I edged around the corner, flashlight ahead of me. The beam caught the lip of a shovel buried in loose gravel, blade stained darker than rust. I swallowed hard, heart hammering in my throat. Another scrape, closer, beneath the station's overhang. I flicked my light downward. Two figures kneeling by the pump island, their backs to me. I couldn't see their faces, but recognized their postures. One held a flashlight. The other used a small saw blade, gas can in hand. They were pouring something thick and dark into the engine of a black sedan, the hiss of overheating metal spitting in the cold air. I drew my weapon. State Trooper, freeze! My voice echoed against the metal siding. They jerked upright, spinning. The saw blade flashed. Before they could draw the knife, I fired a warning shot, crack, into the ground between us. Gravel exploded. They both recoiled, dropping their tools. I stepped forward, pressing the muzzle into the taller man's chest. Hands up, I barked. They raised them slowly, pale in the strobe of my light. Backup arrived seconds later, lights painting the station red and blue. Two more cruisers screeched onto the asphalt. I cuffed them this time swiftly, pressing them face down until they were secured. Once safe, I pried the hood of the sedan up. Thick black sludge filled the engine bay, smelling of burnt oil and something fouler. Chemical. Acrid. I radioed for hazmat. As I waited, I noticed lettering on the car door, a faded logo for a local private haul outfit that had declared bankruptcy months ago. No owner listed, no voicemail, just another phantom. After they hauled the sludge-soaked suspects into the back of a cruiser, I stood alone under the lamp, watching their cruiser peel away. The fog swirled, drifting across my boots like a living thing. The station sat silent now, camera shutters closed, pumps empty. My radio buzzed with hazmat ETA and forensic units. I clicked it off. silence returned, heavy and accusing. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my windshield wiper. "They know you're coming." In jagged handwriting, smeared with something that looked unsettlingly like dried oil. I stared at it, stomach twisting. There was no signature, no print, just those 4 words raining down on me like bullets. Now, whenever I patrol that corridor, I check the lot hours in advance. I peer under the station's eaves, inspect tire tracks, test the pumps. Still, there's no logic to it. No license plates, no cell records, no camera footage. Just a growing sense that I'm being watched, baited, and that wherever those men came from, they're never far behind. I found the note that morning, tucked under the windshield wiper blade like an invitation I never asked for. The words were smeared in something dark. Oil, maybe something thicker, and read, "They know you're coming." My chest tightened. I peeled it free, fingertips grazing the sticky residue. In the rearview mirror, my own eyes stared back. Red-rimmed, haunted, refusing to blink. I folded the paper twice, stuffed it into my pocket, and drove to the station without saying a word. That day, every call felt hollow. I approved paperwork, ran records, answered questions about my mental fitness. Serafina, the dispatcher, glanced at me as I keyed in mileage logs. "You okay, Harper?" she asked, voice soft over the mic. I forced a nod. "Just needed to clear my head," she sighed. "Take the day off if you need." I declined. Whenever someone offered me a way out, I sharpened against it. "Not yet," I said. That evening, I couldn't sleep. My cot in the guest room felt like concrete. I pressed my palms against my temples, trying to erase the images. Garbage bags shifting under that single lamp. Bodies half glimpsed through heavy plastic. The grotesque finality of it all. At 2 a.m. I gave up, rolled out of bed and yanked on my patrol uniform. I grabbed my coat, keys, badge, anything that reminded me I still belonged in this world. Back behind the wheel, the highway opened before me like a yawning maw. Mile marker 46, then 47. Each flash of reflector post felt like stepping closer to a trap. The station's amber lamp winked on my approach. I pulled alongside the curb, engine idling, and watched as a breeze flared dust motes in the beam. No footprints this time, only the harsh circle of light where the 2 cars once waited. I circled the station, checking every corner. By the dumpsters I found fresh prints, deep, narrow treads I recognized from my cruiser's spare, not mine. I radioed dispatch. Unusual tire impressions at Twin Pines, but static snarled back. They were busy with calls about an accident up north. I snapped the mic shut, alone again. Then my phone buzzed. A text from a blocked number. "Stop digging, or you will vanish." My breath caught. I stared at the dark screen. Who knew my badge number? My schedule? I slid the phone into my pocket and kept moving. Every sense screaming that hiding wouldn't help. The cracked concrete underfoot was slick with dew. I stepped under the awning beside the pumps and saw it. A child's plastic toy car, smeared with mud and something darker. A cruiser model, painted black. It sat on the cracked concrete as if left for me to find. My pulse thundered. I shone my flashlight on the perimeter. No one. The toy wasn't mine. No kid should be out here. The station was closed weeks ago. The toy felt like a deliberate message. I radioed for backup. "Caldwell, send unit to Twin Pines. Harper needs eyes on the ground." Caldwell, my old partner, was 15 minutes out. I knelt and bagged the toy in an evidence pouch from my jacket, careful not to smudge fingerprints. As I stood, I saw movement behind the station's shuttered windows, the silhouette of someone ducking out of sight. I holstered my weapon slowly, raised my light and called out, "If you're in there, show yourself. State Trooper." My voice echoed against corrugated steel. The window rattled. For a heartbeat, I thought someone might answer. Then the trembling stopped. Silence fell again, thick and mocking. Moments later, Caldwell arrived. Sirens whispered off in the distance. He stepped out of his cruiser, rain-slick face drawn. "Mark, you okay?" he asked, voice low. I handed him the bagged toy. "Found this." He frowned at the evidence tag. "What the hell?" His radio crackled with other calls. He keyed it off. "Let's sweep the perimeter." Together, we moved behind the gas pumps, flashlights carving arcs in the night. The air smelled of damp pine and rust. I showed him the prints near the dumpsters. He knelt, ran his gloved finger around the impression, then looked up at me. "They're fresh," he said. "Less than an hour old." I nodded, scanning tree line. "And they're heading into the woods." We followed the tracks into the pines, flashlight beams crisscrossing. The world beyond the trees was pitch. No moon, thick canopy swallowing every star. Our boots crunched pine needles and broken twigs. I drew my weapon. Caldwell followed suit. 10 yards in, he jerked his light to the left. "Mark, what is that?" He pointed at the base of a massive fir. There, nailed to the bark, was my badge, gleaming dully in the beam. Underneath, a square of burlap, soaked dark, embroidered with letters. "You're next." My stomach turned. My hands shook. This crossed every boundary. Someone had invaded my home, rifled through my locker to grab my badge, then marched it here to taunt me. Caldwell stepped forward slowly. "We need to get out. Call it in." I swallowed, voice hoarse. "Not yet." I fumbled my radio. "Dispatch, Trooper 14. We have a hostage badge and further evidence at tree line, requesting full perimeter lockdown." The response was a murmur. Backup would arrive. We backed away from the badge, trying not to disturb any more evidence. Every snap of a branch sounded like footsteps following us. Our own breathing was loud in our ears. The longer we stood, the more oppressive the darkness felt, as though it had weight. Caldwell placed a hand on my shoulder. "Let's clear out. This is beyond us." I nodded, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "Yeah, let's go." We returned to the station, but the note under my windshield was gone. The toy car vanished, the badge still glued to that tree. Caldwell drove us back to base in near silence. At the precinct, he made the call to homicide and the forensics team. I removed my belt, stowed my weapon, then stared at my reflection in the locker room mirror. My face was pale beneath yesterday's stubble. There were flecks of dirt on my uniform. My heart still raced, refusing to slow. "Go home, Harper," Caldwell said, breaking the silence. "They can cover this. You need rest." I clenched my jaw. "I'll drive around perimeter tonight alone," I said. He stared for a moment, then nodded. "Be careful." That night, I patrolled beyond the assigned route, circling Twin Pines repeatedly. I noted every crack in the pavement, every broken bulb, every potential hiding spot. At 3:03 a.m., I heard scraping again, this time directly beneath my cruiser. I killed the engine, sat in darkness, and listened. A soft tap at my driver's side window followed. My breathing stuck in my throat as I reached for my torch. I cracked the glass just enough to slip the light under the frame. A single glove lay there, leather cracked and soaked. I recognized the pattern. Caldwell's gloves. My blood ran cold. I sat frozen, heart thunderous. The glove was creased as if someone had slipped a hand into it recently. Then, scrawled in red across the leather, "Now." I jerked the door open, drawing my weapon. Nobody in sight. The lot was empty, silent except for the distant hum of the interstate. I grabbed the glove, threw it onto the passenger seat, slammed the door, and locked every latch. Back at the precinct, the glove went into evidence. Forensic techs found no prints, wiped clean. Nobody could tell me who left it, but I knew. Now I lie awake, haunted by the idea that someone knows my every move, my schedules, my gear, even the route I take home. The station cameras remain offline. The prints vanish as quickly as they appear. My wife says I'm losing it. My sergeant warns about protocol breaches, but I refuse to bow out, because I know they're watching. And I know they're waiting. The hours that followed felt like I was tumbling through slow motion. The precinct gave me sanctuary, but also silenced me. Every time I tried to unwind the knot in my chest, I heard the whisper of those words. Now. On my last shift before mandatory leave, I vowed I'd find out who was tormenting me. I toggled between desperation and resolve, knowing that if I faltered, they'd strike again. It was past midnight when I slipped out of the station, trading my cruiser for an unmarked sedan borrowed from a detective friend. The engine's purr was unfamiliar, but I needed deniability. No lights, no sirens, just me against the night. I pointed the car toward Twin Pines, but before I left the lot, I stopped and glanced back at the shuttered facade of the station. The asphalt gleamed under sodium lamps, and for a moment I felt exposed, like a lone deer in a hunter's scope. Then I eased onto the highway. My route skirted the pines more closely than patrol dictated. I took the county back roads, hugging tree lines so thick my headlights barely pierced them. The air in the car was thick with the smell of stale coffee and my own sweat. I patted my pockets, flashlight, extra magazine, phone, wallet, no badge, no uniform. Tonight, I wanted to be just Harper, not Trooper 14. When I reached the rest stop exit, I coasted past the usual spot, then looped back, spinning tires on gravel. No cruisers in sight. Backups were supposed to monitor my shift, but perhaps they'd given up the chase. The amber lamps above the pumps flickered in greeting. I parked 50 feet away, engine idling, and watched the station through tinted glass. For a long minute, nothing happened. The lot lay empty, save for the rusted sign that creaked in the breeze. Then headlights sparked at the far edge of the lot. 2 sets, low beams, almost imperceptible. They pulled in, tires crunching gravel. The cars were sleek sedans, one black, one obsidian blue, unmarked, untraceable. Mirrors folded in multiple directions. They eased to a stop equidistant from the pump islands, just where I'd first found those 2 empty cars. Adrenaline roared through me. I flicked off my headlights to disappear into shadow, drew my weapon, and crept toward the pumps. My boots barely made a sound on the damp concrete. I peered around the corner. 2 men climbed out, identical builds to the ones I'd cuffed. Same height, same gait, but their faces obscured by scarves and knit caps. They moved with methodical precision, retrieving garbage bags and tools from their trunks. I raised my light to get a clear shot. The taller one jerked around, face half-masked, eyes glinting with recognition. Or was it amusement? He let out a soft, amused chuckle. The shorter one froze, saw my flashlight and reached inside his coat. My finger tightened on the trigger. "Don't," I growled. "A state trooper." They laughed, low and mirthless. "Mark Harper," the tall one said, voice muffled. "We've been expecting you." He stepped forward, hands out of coat, empty. Or, should I say, Harper in hiding? My heart thundered. "Show your hands." They complied, slowly, deliberately. The garbage bags lay at their feet, stubborn bulges pressing against plastic. I clenched my teeth. "What are you doing here?" The tall man tilted his head. "You called us, remember? You begged for answers." The shorter one kicked at the bags. You wanted to know why the cars came and went. You wanted to know about the bodies. I felt bile rise. These two were amateurs, I spat. They got caught. What does that have to do with me? The tall man's eyes narrowed. You think this ends with 2 arrests? You think the rest stop is just a crime scene? He shook his head. This place is a threshold. You crossed it when you took that first call. I swallowed, voice steadying. I was doing my job. He laughed again. Yes, you were. And now, we're doing ours. The shorter man knelt and unzipped one bag. I spun, gun drawn, prepared for the worst, but inside was only a tangle of wires and metal shards, bits of shattered electronics. He dumped them on the ground. We found this, he said. Your cruiser's dash cam, your last footage. My chest tightened. They'd rifled my car, stolen my evidence. I gritted my teeth. Where is it now? They exchanged a glance. Before we show you, we want proof. The taller man stretched out his hand. Inside his palm, my sergeant's badge, * Daniels, precinct 17 *. My heart sank. You break in there, take my partner's badge? I wouldn't lower my weapon. He's not involved. But he is, the tall man said softly. He's the one who filed the complaints. He's the one who sent internal affairs to your house. My jaw clenched. What are you? A sudden roar filled the lot. Multiple engines, sirens, backup arriving. Both men raised a hand in salute, then melted back into shadow, sprinting toward the pines. Their pace was almost casual, as though they knew the woods better than the asphalt. I sprinted after them, gun in one hand, light in the other, but they were gone. No tracks, no sign beyond a smear of mud leading into denser forest. The sirens converged on the rest stop. I heard radios crackle. Trooper 14, suspects fled, initiating pursuit. But I shook my head, breath ragged. No, I muttered. They're not the suspects. I turned back to the pumps, where the wires lay in a tangled heap. I knelt, scooping them into evidence bags. Something thrummed in my mind. They wanted me to uncover something. Wanted me to realize the rest stop itself was a lure. I staggered back to my sedan as the other units fanned out, lights bobbing through the misty pines. I waved them off, flashing my unmarked credentials. I got this, I said. Stay light. They hesitated, then melted behind trees. I drove home on autopilot, dark thoughts tumbling. How deep did this go? Was there a network of people using remote rest stops to feed something? Whatever it was, it had resources. Cars, stolen dash cams, intimate knowledge of my shifts and routes. When I reached my driveway, a single envelope lay on the front porch. Inside, a small USB drive and a card. Plug me in. My hand shook so badly, the drive slipped from my grasp and clattered on the concrete. I picked it up, dusting off the corners, and felt its weight. Small, innocuous, lethal. I pressed it into my pocket and stepped inside, flipping on lights to chase away shadows. My wife was asleep, curled under blankets, oblivious. I paused in the doorway. So many times I'd come home and unpicked the night from my bones before surrendering to sleep. Tonight, I didn't dare. Instead, I locked the door, pocketed my pistol beneath the couch cushion, and sat at my desk. The USB drive gleamed under the lamp's glow. My phone buzzed, an incoming text. From a number I recognized as my own. Don't. I stared at the screen. My reflection in the monitor wavered. My hand drifted toward the USB slot. Then I heard it. A soft knock on the window behind me. 3 slow raps. I froze. My pulse hammered in my ears. The knocking came again, patient, insistent. I didn't dare turn, didn't dare breathe, and yet I had to know. I sat at my desk, long after the moon slipped behind the western clouds, the small LED of my laptop bathing the room in blue-white light. The USB drive felt impossibly heavy in my palm, like a promise of truth and a threat of doom all at once. My reflection in the black screen stared back at me with hollow eyes. Outside, the wind rattled the window frame, tapping out a slow, deliberate code. Knock, knock, knock. Every instinct screamed at me to leave the drive alone, to call it in and walk away. But my hands moved of their own accord, reaching for the laptop's port. I hovered over the keyboard, throat dry, pulse thundering. 1 inch, I told myself. An inch, and I'd know what they'd stolen. What they wanted me to see. What proof they held. The drive slid in with a soft click. The screen flickered, then filled with a single file. Open me now .mp4. My stomach tensed. I double-clicked. A progress bar crawled across the screen in jagged bursts. Then the video opened, grainy, desaturated night vision green. The timestamp in the corner read, August 17th, 2:32 a.m., the night I found those bodies. The footage was my dash cam but warped. At first, it was just my cruiser's headlights cutting through the storm. Then the camera panned abruptly, as though someone had yanked the lens to one side. I heard a low chuckle over distorted audio, and then the image steadied on me. In uniform, flashlight trained on 2 black sedans. My own voice echoed through the speaker, "Step away from the vehicles." But the men in the video didn't budge. Instead, they turned toward the camera, faces half-masked, eyes glinting. The taller one raised a hand in mock salute. My breath caught. They had my dash cam, had been filming me. I replayed the clip. The video cut to static, then resumed in a different location. The back of the rest stop. Lights from a cruiser strobed red and blue. My helmet cam view showed me cuffing the shorter man. His head lolled, and I saw, just for a split second, the long, frantic shape of something moving in the tree line behind me. Something that no one on my reports had ever seen. I paused the video, heart pounding, then let it play on. Next came a sequence that made me spill hot coffee onto my lap, footage from inside my own house. Not CCV, something else. The camera stood on a shelf in my office, lens tilted so it captured half my desk in the doorway behind me. I watched myself plug in the drive, oblivious to being spied on. Even more chilling, I saw someone, shrouded in darkness, step into frame behind me. The figure raised a finger to motion for silence, then retreated off-screen. The audio hummed with static and a faint whisper. Now, my hands trembled. The figure's coat was unmistakably the same style the tall man had worn at Twin Pines. They'd broken into my home, installed a camera, stolen footage, planted clues. Whoever they were inside my life in a way I couldn't escape. I forced myself to keep watching. Then the footage switched to live feed, a view from somewhere above, like a drone shot. It looked down on my house, the driveway, the empty street. The glow of my desk lamp was a pinpoint through the trees. A red dot pulsed in the center, as if marking me. My pulse spiked. The timestamp blinked forward in real time. I glanced at my watch. 3:07 a.m. The feed was live. My phone buzzed on the desk, illuminating the darkroom with a single word. Look. I turned from the screen, fearing what I'd see outside the office window. The knocking had stopped. Silence pressed in. I swallowed, reached for my duty pistol slung under the couch cushion, and crept toward the window. The glass was cold under my palm. I shone the flashlight outside. Nothing. Just the empty driveway slick with rain. A row of hedges shivered in the breeze. No footprints, no headlights. My reflection stared back, haunted, unblinking. Then the light of a single car swept across the yard, low beams, idling. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. My breath caught. A heartbeat later, the knocking resumed. Soft, urgent, 3 taps. I backed away, heart hammering against my ribs. On the porch light, someone had left another item. A small video camera, its lens aimed directly at my front door. Beneath it, etched into the wooden step with a pocket knife, were words I'd come to dread. Final chapter. My mind raced. I holstered my service weapon, dialed dispatch on my cell with shaking fingers. No signal. I cursed, smashed the phone against the desk. It clattered to the floor, dead. Whoever had orchestrated this had cut me off from help. I grabbed the small camera, shoved it into my coat pocket, then returned to the laptop. The live feed was still running. The red dot hovered over my house. A cursor blinked over the file name. Play next? No other options. I clicked. The screen went black. Then, frame by frame, I watched the tall man step from behind the camera. Same coat, same stance. His face now fully revealed. Scar across his left cheek, eyes cold as glass. He raised a gloved finger, pointed at me, and mouthed 2 words. "You're trapped." The image stuttered, then shifted to a new angle. Camera inside my eyeball, streaming from my own perspective. I was looking through my own eyes, watching myself watch him. I felt sick. The video cut once more, replaced by a blank white screen. Text scrawled across it in dripping crimson letters. "Your turn." The words pulsed, as though alive. The lamp behind me flickered, and the whisper returned, louder this time. "Step outside." I stood, paralyzed, every nerve shredding with fear. A slow clap echoed through the room, from somewhere behind me. I turned, compelled, to see the tall man standing in my doorway, rain-dark coat dripping, face half in shadow. He held out a gloved hand. In it, my sergeant's badge. "He's safe," the tall man said, voice low and mocking. "For now." The shorter man stood behind him, grinning through the darkness, knife glinting at his side. My finger trembled on the trigger. I aimed at him, voice unsteady. "What do you want?" He smiled, tilted his head like a curious cat. "Balance," he said. "You took their lives. Now you'll see what it feels like when someone takes yours." He stepped forward, slow, deliberate. I squeezed the trigger, but it clicked on an empty chamber. My heart seized. They'd known. They'd emptied my weapon days ago. He laughed, a soft exhale. Then I felt it, a cold breeze at my shoulder. I spun, but there was nothing. The room was deathly silent, save for the hiss of my own breathing. When I looked back, the tall man was gone, the doorway empty. The only sign he'd ever been there was the puddle of water at the threshold, and my sergeant's badge lying on the floor, glinting up at me. I sank to my knees, clutching the laptop, the dash cam footage frozen on the last frame, a close-up of my own terrified face. The video camera and the USB drive lay on the desk beside me like trophies. My heart pounded. I was both hunter and prey, trapped in a nightmare I'd been chasing, unable to escape. A soft whisper pricked at the edge of my mind. "Your move." I looked at the flashing cursor on the screen, the badge at my feet, the darkened street outside. The final file still sat there, waiting. I reached toward the keyboard, breath shaking. And then I paused. What choice would you make if you were in my place? Still with me? Good, that means you're ready for the rest. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you want more cases just like this one. 2:47 a.m. on August 14th still hits me like a punch. I can't tell you how many times I've replayed that moment in my head. Every bead of sweat, every crack of gravel, every flicker of the beam cutting through the darkness. I wasn't meant to talk about it, but here we are. I was 3 months into the force. Still a rookie. Patrol Unit 324, badge number 1457. Monroe County was quiet most nights. Strip malls and mobile homes, the occasional late-night diner still serving breakfast at 3 a.m. But Hollow Creek Road was different. A twisting ribbon of gravel and legend. Folks talked about that place like you'd talk about a rattlesnake in your boot. Real, dangerous, best left alone. When dispatch pinged me the first time, I was 2 miles east on County Route 9, fresh off a noise complaint at the Johnson farm. Unit 324, open 911 at 145 Hollow Creek Road, caller hung up. Protocol kicks in instantly. I checked the GPS, flicked on my lights, and eased the cruiser onto the gravel. Headlights slicing through a canopy of oaks. Rain from earlier that night had left the stones slick. My boots found grip on the pedals. The house sat in silence. 2 stories of peeling white paint. Windows shuttered as if someone boarded them up years ago. No porch light, no motion. I parked beside a rusted-out Ford, half buried in brambles. I radioed, "Dispatch 324 on scene. Looks vacant, no lights, no vehicles. Checking front door." My voice sounded flat in the headset. Gravel crunched under my boots as I approached. The air smelled of pine needles and wet earth, the humidity clinging like a damp blanket. I knocked once, twice, shoulder height. No answer. I circled the house, flashlight beam glancing off plywood covering one window. All locks intact. I called it in. Negative contact. I'm clear. Place appears abandoned. Back in the cruiser, I watched the house fade in my mirror. I turned off lights and radioed back in service. Simple. Routine. Except I couldn't shake that hush, like someone exhaling behind me. I slept fitfully that night. Moonlight through my bedroom blinds cast shadows on the ceiling. Trees swaying outside, arms reaching. My phone lit up at exactly 2:47 a.m. No call, just a notification. 911 open at 145 Hollow Creek Road. My gut sank. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over dispatch. I swiped it off and tried to go back to sleep. No luck. The second call came 6 hours later on my next night shift. Dispatch 324, open 911 from 145 Hollow Creek. Caller reports crying, then hung up. I checked the clock. 2:50 a.m. My heart thumped. I grabbed my jacket, helmet, and extra magazine. Suiting up felt ritualistic. Bulletproof vest cinched tight. Radio clipped at my shoulder. Glock holstered. I eased out of the station, lights off, siren muted, and slipped onto Hollow Creek again. The drive felt longer this time. Gravel sprayed under tires. Trees arched overhead. Mist curled around my headlights. My breath fogged the window and I blinked. Was that someone standing at the edge of the tree line? I slammed brakes, beam sweeping the empty roadside. Nothing. Push it aside. Keep going. At the driveway, I killed the engine and grabbed my radio. Dispatch, I'm on scene. Front door cracked. The faintest slice of light showed in the window seam. I edged forward, Glock in one hand, flashlight in the other. The door creaked as I pushed. Inside, it was colder. An unnatural chill. My beam carved through darkness. Stale air, peeling wallpaper, an overturned chair in the entry. No carpet, just floorboards slick with spilled something dark. I called it. Dispatch, I'm entering. Proceeding to check for victim. The dispatcher's voice crackled back. Copy that. Proceed with caution. Hallway stretched into blackness. I stepped slowly, ears straining for cries. Silence wrapped tight until I heard it, muffled sobbing. Not far ahead, behind a white door swollen with rot. I pressed close, hand on the knob. It gave. The hinges groaned as I eased it open. Nothing but an empty room. Bare floor, cracked ceiling. Then the sobbing stopped. I swept the beam left, right, no one. My throat tightened. What if the caller slipped out back? I radioed, negative visible. Checking other rooms. No answer. I paused by the doorway, foot tapping. That's when I caught it. Faint mechanical hum echoing from below. Basement stairs. Another door, half ajar, my pulse spiked. I radioed for backup. 324 to dispatch. Possible victim in basement. Need medics and 242 and 247. The crackling reply, backup en route. I drew my Glock, flashlight beam dancing over peeling paint and scrawled graffiti. Initials carved into wood. 1 step, 2 step, then 3. The hum grew, a dial tone. Cold dread seeped into my bones. At the bottom, concrete walls glistened with moisture. And there it was, an old rotary-style speakerphone. Off the hook, cord coiled on the floor, tone looping. Breathing shallow, I snapped the receiver back. The buzzing cut out like a static killed. Then laughter, low, wet, malformed, crawled from the far corner. The beam swung. A man lurked there, jeans torn, eyes wild. One hand clamped over his mouth, the other gripping a revolver. The metal caught the beam. He pressed it to his temple. Time slowed. I aimed my Glock high ready. Drop it, I shouted, voice cracking against the concrete. The figure shifted, shoulders twitching, then shot up his arm in a mirror image. I squeezed off 2 rounds. The shots echoed, ricocheting off walls. He screamed, staggered, dropped the revolver, hands balling into fists. I cuffed his wrists, chest heaving. Upstairs, my backup blazed in. Sirens off, but lights painting the walls. Medics swarmed in. One clipped a stethoscope around his neck, nodding to me. The suspect lay groaning, murmuring between clenched teeth. You shouldn't have come back. No one got that time, just me. I remember the medic hauling him out, the recycling clang of the ambulance doors. I radioed clean. 324 clear. Shots fired, suspect detained, no fatalities. Scene turning over to detectives. I returned to the cruiser, hands trembling, chest still thrumming. I wanted to throttle the radio off, but then it crackled. 324, confirm status? Clear, I managed. I shut it down and eased back onto Hollow Creek, eyes flicking to the dark shape of the house. Later, back at the station, I wrote my report until dawn. After that, sleep was impossible. Visions of that basement, cold concrete, humming dial tone, his laughter, played behind my eyelids. I started calling in extra counseling sessions, but the shrink only took notes. He asked if I'd experienced flashbacks. I nodded, throat too tight for words. A week passed. I tried normalcy, traffic stops, welfare checks, 2 a.m. coffee runs at Jerry's Diner. But at exactly 2:47 a.m. every night, my heart would seize. My phone would light up with that phantom dispatch chime. No call, no text, just the memory. I dug into records, county archives, old newspapers. The house at 145 Hollow Creek Road had belonged to the Thornton family. Vacant since the mother disappeared in 1998. Dad found hanging in the barn weeks later. 2 children placed in foster care. Officially, the property was condemned, but nobody ever demolished it. Ghost stories clung to it. One night, 3 nights after the incident, I sat in my cruiser behind the house, notebook open. Headlights off. I checked the time. 2:47 exactly. Radio silent. No hum. Then my phone buzzed. New voicemail from unknown caller. Fingering my radio mic, I braced. The playback clicked on, static. Then a girl's voice, soft and far away. "Why won't you come back?" The line dropped. No more static. Just the night and my blood turning to ice. My hand slipped off the phone. I looked up. The house windows stared back at me, dark and empty. But I heard laughter again, muted, right behind me. I spun around, empty road, mist curling in the beams. That's when I knew. I had to go back inside. Not as a cop, but as someone who needed answers, who needed to face whatever was waiting in those shadows. I flipped on the cruiser, radioing dispatch. 324, I'm going in again. I need one more unit and medics on standby. My voice sounded hollow. Dispatch hesitated, then replied, "Unit 324, additional backup 247 and 242 en route. ETA 5 minutes. I killed the radio. I pocketed my phone. I stepped out into the gravel, rain beginning to fall. Each drop splashed against my helmet. I squared my shoulders, flashlight in one hand, Glock in the other. I crossed the driveway, the night pressing in. My boots sank into mud. The door loomed. I took a breath, and I put my hand on the knob. My hand trembled on the doorknob, cool metal slick beneath my glove. The rain had turned the gravel into mud. Each step forward squelched beneath my boots. The night pressed in around me, black and unrelenting, broken only by the pale beam of my flashlight. Backup units were 5 minutes out, or so dispatch said, but if I waited, I'd never convince myself to go inside. Everything in me screamed to turn around, to call it off, but I stepped over the threshold and into the house once more. The front door swung shut behind me with a solemn click that echoed through the entryway. My flashlight stabbed into the gloom, revealing the overturned chair I'd seen 2 nights before. Its legs splintered as if someone had fallen against it. The smell of damp wood and mildew was stronger now, almost cloying. I swallowed past the lump in my throat, tightened my grip on my Glock, and started to move. I passed rooms I'd already searched. The living room, with its shattered picture frame lying face down. The kitchen, with a sink half filled with yesterday's rainwater dripping through a leaky roof. I didn't bother rechecking. They were empty. My focus was on the basement, on whatever had called to me through that dial tone, that tortured laugh. Voices crackled faintly on my radio. 247 here, ETA 90 seconds, said a calm, female voice. Medics are standing by. I whispered, "Copy that." No relief there, just the knowledge that more eyes would soon shine into this same darkness. I moved down the narrow hallway toward the stairs, my boots whispering on the threadbare runner. Each step felt heavier. At the foot of the stairs I paused, shining my light upward at the cracked ceiling. A web of mold stretched across the plaster like dark veins. My breath hitched, and I reminded myself, this is a house. It can't be alive. I edged down the stairs, one careful foot in front of the other, counting them silently. 1, 2, 3. The wood groaned, complaining under my weight. Mid-stair, the beam of my flashlight landed on something new. Footprints in the dust, small, bare footprints like a child's. They led up the banister. My pulse slammed against my ribs. I swept the light around. The footprints continued, into the living room, across the floorboards, and then vanished at the threshold of a closed door I hadn't noticed before. A bedroom door, paint chipped and swollen. I flicked my radio to life. 324 to all units. I found footprints. Size indicates a child, moving from the basement up through the first floor. Door ahead, locked. Recommend breaching tool. Static, then the dispatcher. 247 and 242 are nearly on scene. Hold position. I swallowed hard and pressed my shoulder into the door. It creaked but held fast. My fingers fumbled at the lock. I rapped knuckles against wood. "Police! Open up!" My own voice sounded strange, hollow. No answer, no whisper of movement inside. I kicked. The door shuddered, but the frame held. I fired 2 rounds at the handle. Not enough to penetrate, but to unbalance the lock. Splinters flew. The latch clicked. I twisted the knob and threw the door open in one swift motion. Inside, the air was still and stale. Moonlight filtered through a cracked window, illuminating a small bed draped in moth-eaten quilts. A single toy soldier lay on the pillow, its paint chipped. The footprints led under the bed. My flashlight flicked to the gap between floor and baseboard. A thin, dark stain caked on the wall. It looked like dried blood, smeared across the plaster in jagged lines. My stomach rolled. I crouched and traced the smear with my gloved fingertip, sticky, fresh. I radioed, voice tight. 3024. Possible biohazard in bedroom. I need medics now. No sooner had the words left me than a high-pitched giggle echoed through the corridor. I jerked upright, heart in my throat. The light swung to the doorway, and there she stood. A little girl, perhaps 7 or 8, pale skin ashen, nightgown torn, dark hair matted. Her eyes reflected my flashlight like glass beads. She blinked once, smiled, and turned away. Her bare feet leaving more prints in the dust, as she drifted down the hallway toward the basement stairs. "Hold on," I called, but she didn't slow. She passed through the wall of shadow like mist, stepping onto the staircase as though it welcomed her. My jaw clenched. Part of me wanted to chase her, to catch her and get her out of here. The larger part of me shrank back, whispering that something was very wrong. My radio crackled. "Units on scene, 324. Copy," I forced out. "Suspect, or victim, child. Just saw a child heading downstairs. I'm following." The cool air spilled out of the basement door, rolling over my head like a tide. A soft glow pulsed from below, an orange flickering light that couldn't be from any bulb. I raised my flashlight and aimed it into the yawning mouth of the stairs. The little girl was gone, and in her place lay a single shoe, caked in mud, resting on the top step. I clenched my teeth and stepped down. The basement door swung shut behind me with a bang, and I reached out to wrench it open, fingers scraping the cold wood. But before I could, the orange glow pulsed again, and I realized it came from further within. The stairs ended in a small landing. My flashlight beam caught something pinned to the wall. Photos, dozens of them, tacked up in a collage. Faces frozen in time. A smiling family of 4 in the yard. A child grinning with an ice cream cone. A stern man in a suit. A wide-eyed teenager slumped against a school locker. Each photo was marred by a jagged slash. Knife cuts scored through the emulsion, yet still tacked in place. My pulse thundered. I recognized 2 of the faces. The Thornton mother and father, dead for 27 years. I swallowed bile. Fingers trembling, I approached. The air smelled of rust and earth. Below the collage, someone had written with thick black marker, "They never left." A metal clatter sounded behind me. I spun, flashlight flicking to the farthest corner, where a tangle of pipes and boxes made a utility closet. The door was swinging open, slow as a yawning mouth. My breath caught. In the dim glow, I saw something move inside. Long hair drifting, a small hand reaching out. "Freeze!" I barked, gun raised. Silence, then the faint mewling of a child. I edged closer, flashlight illuminating a little girl curled on a metal shelf. She stared up at me, wide-eyed, clutching a teddy bear's head. One of the bear's eyes was missing. "Hey, kid," My voice sounded foreign, strained. "It's okay. I'm going to get you out of here." She just stared, unblinking, and then shook her head. The teddy bear fell, and I heard a metallic clink as her hand brushed against something on the floor. I swept light down, a revolver. The same chrome revolver I'd shot him with, lying in the center of the concrete slab. My mind went cold. How did it get here? How was he? The little girl pointed at the gun and whispered, voice echoing in the only way voices do in those tomb-like spaces. "He's waiting." Before I could react, the collage above me snapped. A splintered board jostling, photos fluttering, and a guttural whisper slithered through the pipes. "You came back." My heart lurched. I shone my light upward, but the beam caught nothing but peeling paint and exposed wiring. My radio crackled. 324, you copy?" I swallowed hard. I'm at the bottom of the stairs. Small room. Need backup now." Static. No reply. Footsteps on concrete, not mine, not the medic's. Slow and deliberate. Coming closer. The little girl squeezed the bear tighter. Her lips quivered. I raised my gun. Footsteps halted. Then a muffled thump, as if something heavy had been dropped. The basement lights, ones I hadn't noticed before, flickered on, bathing the walls in harsh fluorescent glare. The photos on the collage glowed unnervingly. And in the center of that glow, stepping out from behind the shredded board, was the man I'd shot. His eyes hollow, blood seeping through his shirt sleeves, revolver loose in his hand. I dropped low, training my Glock on him. "Drop it. You're under arrest." He cocked his head, silence stretching like a prelude. Then, in a voice that rasped like metal on metal, "I told you. You shouldn't have come back." And behind me, the little girl burbled a laugh, high and clear, as the basement door slammed shut somewhere upstairs. Darkness swallowed us whole. The concrete floor slipped beneath my boots as I backed away from the tacked-up photographs, heart hammering. The little girl's laugh tinkled in the stagnant air like broken glass, and the man I'd shot, some blend of living flesh and something darker, stepped fully into the flickering glow, revolver drooping in his hand. Behind me, the utility closet door slid shut with a hollow thud. I snapped my head toward it and saw the metal handle tremble, as if gripped by an unseen force. I raised my Glock, finger poised on the trigger, but my breath came in ragged gasps. Every muscle in my body screamed to run, but the only way out was up those stairs, past the footprints in the slashed family photos, through the hallway, and over the broken chair in the entryway. My radio lay forgotten on the floor, dead battery or dead signal. I couldn't tell. Backup had to be close, but silence answered my frantic calls. The little girl tilted her head, eyes glinting. She pointed up at the low ceiling. "He's under here," she whispered, voice distant and hollow. My flashlight beam flickered as the bulbs threatened to die. I swallowed and edged forward, keeping both targets, child and specter, in the same frame. Every step brought a wet drip of water from a corroded pipe overhead that spattered onto the cracked concrete. As I passed the collage, the man took a lumbering step forward. His shirt was soaked through at the chest, dark rings fanning out in the fabric. A low rumble reverberated in his throat, neither human nor animal. Yet every instinct told me he was real and deadly. I squeezed my eyes shut, forced my fingers to unclench and let the safety off. "Move," I barked at the child. "This way." But she only giggled, blue-eyed and immovable. She drifted backward into a shadowed corner, then merged with the dark until she was gone. A sudden dread rolled through me. She was bait. The man raised his revolver slowly, cocked it with a rasp that set my teeth on edge. I flinched, pressed the muzzle of my Glock against my palm. Not enough to fire, but enough to remind myself I still had options. I edged sideways, tracking him with my flashlight. The shadows stretched and writhed around us, as if alive. A crash of metal from somewhere deeper in the basement made me whirl. My pulse spiked. Something had fallen. Toolbox, pipe, body. My feet carried me toward the sound, adrenaline surging. The suspect's laugh, a guttural, warped mimicry of joy, chased me. I rounded a stack of crates and saw an old trapdoor set into the floor. Bitumen cracked edges splintered as though forced open. My training told me to hold position, call for containment. But training doesn't account for the blood-red glue of fear that binds your limbs. I knelt and pried at the hatch with trembling fingers. Below, beyond the broken slats, glowed a dim, sulphurous light, yellow and wavering, like a row of candles. A fetid draft curled upward, carrying the smell of rot and something else, something metallic, like copper and old earth. I glanced back. The man stood at the top of the stairs, revolver spinning in his hand. He smiled, a crooked thing that slid over his pale features. "Come down to me," he hissed. "Find her." And then the little girl's voice, distant but clear. "Hurry!" I dropped the hatch cover and clambered through the opening, each finger clutching the rotting frame. The air hit me like a slap, wet, cold, thick with the smell of decay. I landed on damp soil, knees sinking into loose earth. I shined my light around. A narrow tunnel stretched away, carved roughly into the bank under the house. Walls of mud and exposed root formed a crude corridor. The sulphurous glow pulsed ahead, illuminating wet stones embedded in the walls. My heart lurched. The world above, with its steps and familiar layout, was gone. Below, the tunnel sloped downward, promising either salvation or damnation. My hand closed around the butt of my Glock. I tucked the flashlight between my teeth and advanced. The tunnel narrowed, too tight for me to keep both arms forward. I dropped to one knee, sliding forward on my palms, grit scratching at my uniform. Every breath echoed in my skull. Water dripped from the ceiling, making the floor slick. At one point, my hand brushed against something wet and soft. Soil stained dark, then a tiny shoe sole pressed into the mud. I traced the imprint up to a heel, then to the muddy edge of a little foot. My breath caught. She had come this way. The sulfur glow grew stronger. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber carved into the hillside, its ceiling low and arched. The flicker came from dozens of candles planted in rings on the floor, their wax cooling into black rivulets. In the center of the largest circle stood an altar of warped wood, scarred with symbols, initials scrawled in nail-dark blood. They matched the faces: T, L, J, M, Thornton family. Beneath the symbols, words scratched, never forgotten. My flashlight caught movement at the edge of the chamber. The little girl stood there, cradling her teddy bear, its glass eye glinting in the candlelight. She stared at me, expression unreadable, then trotted forward through the ring of light. A slow, swelling chant began, low and indistinct, like the susurration of wind, except it was voices, whispered in unison, ancient and hollow. I raised my Glock, my finger hovered, terror pooled in my gut. Two paths lay before me: follow the girl deeper toward the altar, or turn and claw my way back up through the hatch into the house, and hope daylight sped toward me faster than pursuing darkness. My radio crackled to life, briefly. 324? The voice was half drowned in static. Then nothing. Backup must be stalled at the front door, lost in locks and shadows. The man I'd thought dead strode into the chamber behind the girl. His revolver vanished. Now his hand was empty, outstretched in invitation. His face melted toward me in the dim light. eyes like black pits. Guilt flooded me. Why had I shot him? Would killing him again free me, or were bullets meaningless here? I can help, I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I meant the girl or myself. She looked up at me, eyes flashing with something I couldn't name. Sadness, anger, longing. Her voice rose above the chant. Save me. The candles guttered as a sudden wind gusted through the tunnel, though no opening was visible. Wax sparked and spat. The floor beneath the altar cracked, splitting apart like broken skin, and a low moan came from the fissure. Deep, resonant, alive. I took a hesitant step toward her. My boots sank slightly into the soil, then jolted as if the ground shifted. The fissure widened, sending tremors through the chamber. The chanting swelled into a crescendo of fractured voices. The walls dripped moisture, and shapes writhed in the darkness beyond the candle glow. Forms too tall and gaunt, hunched over, arms sweeping the floor. I should have fired, but something held me back. The girl's silent plea. I set my Glock on the altar's edge, finger easing off the trigger. Every instinct shouted, run, but I couldn't leave her in whatever ritual this was. The man reached for her, his free hand trembling as he hovered inches from her shoulder. She didn't flinch. Instead, she turned her little face up to his and whispered something inaudible. Then she grasped his wrist, and he gasped, more human in that moment than he'd ever been. The chant stuttered, melting into a single dirge of yearning. I slid forward, hands raised. Stay away from her, I said, voice cracking. But the chamber erupted in a roar of voices, as though every spirit bound to this place screamed in unison. Candles exploded in wax and flame, and the tunnel entrance collapsed behind me, burying the hatch under rubble. The exit was gone. I was trapped. Light danced on the man's face, half his own, half something else. He looked at me, eyes now wet with tears. She will be free, he whispered. But first you must choose. My lungs burned. My mouth went dry. The chanting faded into a whisper that circled the chamber like smoke. The girl took a step toward a shallow pit opened at the altar's base, its edges slick with mud. Inside, I could see bones, fragments of ribs, small and fragile, laid out in a deliberate pattern. My skin crawled. I will save her, I said, voice ragged. But tell me how. The man's lips curved into a sorrowful smile. Step in. Silence fell, heavy as stone. The candles flared one last time, then died, plunging me into darkness so complete it felt like being buried alive. I heard her voice, soft in my ear, "It's your turn now." I froze in the absolute darkness, pulse hammering in my ears like a war drum. The air tasted of damp earth and something fouler, metallic and sweet, like blood long congealed. My hands scrabbled on slick soil, searching for purchase as the chanting voices receded to a distant whisper. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to claw my way up the hatch and out into the cool night air, but the tunnel behind me had collapsed. Rubble packed over the opening like a tomb. There was no turning back. I pushed myself upright and swept my flashlight across the chamber. The candles lay snuffed on the floor, blackened wicks jutting from pools of wax. The altar stood at the center, scarred and swollen with moisture, its surface etched deep by knives and nails. Around it, the symbols for T, L, J, M, Thornton family initials, gleamed in the faint ember glow still clinging to the stone. Beneath them, the words, "Never Forgotten," scrawled in dried blood. My shoulders ached under the weight of my vest, but I knew I couldn't linger. Somewhere in this chamber lay the little girl I'd seen, her presence both promise and threat. I limped toward the altar, the tunnel's mud sucking at my boots, each step jarring my bruised ribs. The chant returned, soft and mournful, a dirge rising from cracks in the walls as though the house itself were chanting over a grave. "Child," I whispered, voice brittle, "I'm here." No answer, only that eerie echo bouncing off the damp stone. Then I saw her, huddled in the deepest shadows beyond the altar circle, pale face half hidden behind a curtain of matted hair. She rocked back and forth, clutching the teddy bear, its one glass eye catching the last glow of my flashlight. Her dress was torn and stained, and her small body trembled. I knelt beside her, gently extending a hand. "It's okay, I'm going to get you out." She looked up, eyes empty as wells, too old, too knowing, and shook her head. Her lips parted, and a voice leaked out that was both hers and not hers. "He won't let us go." A cold gust rattled through the chamber, stirring dust and ash. The floor beneath the little girl cracked, splitting in a fracture that ran like a spider's leg toward me. The marrow-chilling whisper slithered from that rift. "You cannot save her." My hand slammed against the altar as I fought to stay upright. I glanced at the grinning man, some grotesque fusion of the Thornton patriarch and whatever horror he'd become, standing at the chamber's edge. His eyes glinted in the dark. I raised my Glock, finger on the trigger, but the weapon felt impossibly heavy. He advanced, boots silent on the damp earth, revolver gone and replaced by a crude ceremonial dagger stained dark at the tip. "She belongs here," he rasped, voice a rattled whisper, "and so do you." I swallowed bile. My chest constricted, breath coming in short, painful rasp. Every memory of training, every call to protect and serve, warred with the primal terror binding my limbs. Yet beneath the fear burned a furious resolve. I wouldn't become another lost memory on these walls. Something in me snapped. I lunged for the altar, toppling candles scattering the circle. The man hissed and lunged after me, dagger raised. I rolled aside, mud spraying, and scrambled for the little girl. She stared at me, eyes wide, no longer glassy but shining with desperate hope. "Come on," I barked, voice raw. I scooped her into my arms. Her body was childlike, but the weight of centuries pressed on my heart. She burst into a screaming wail the moment I lifted her, a sound that reverberated off the walls like shards of ice. The man howled, claws of fury scraping the stones as he came at me. I stumbled backward, hugging the girl tight, and aimed my Glock at his chest. My hand shook so badly I squeezed the trigger twice, but the shots rang hollow and muted. No impact, no recoil, as if the chamber were beyond bullets. My eyes widened in disbelief. He advanced anyway, dagger slicing the air. I couldn't think. Only one thought remained. Escape. I bolted toward the tunnel mouth. The little girl's sobs muffled against my vest. The walls knit closer, roots clawing at my shoulders. The chanting rose again, as though the house animated every stone to block my escape. I reached the broken hatch and hurled myself upward, burying my fingers in splintered wood. The world lurched, I heaved, and loose earth spilled over me. I crawled out of that tomb, mud streaking my uniform, clutching the terrified child as I slithered back into the main tunnel. Above, the house's foundations trembled, a low groan that shook loose bits of dust and brick. My flashlight flickered, panicked failing lights. I stumbled through the narrow passage, slipping on wet soil, the little girl's weight pulling me downward. I forced myself to follow the faint railroad of light at the far end, pushing through claustrophobia that pressed in on all sides. Then, at last, the tunnel spat me out onto the back lawn in a rain of loose stones. I collapsed in the grass, coughing up the stench of rot. The little girl curled into my arms, sobbing. Above us, the house loomed, windows like empty eyes. Lightning fractured the sky, and the house seemed to pulse in the flash, breathing. I sat there, shaking, until the first patrol car crested the driveway. Its headlights cut a path through the darkness. 2 officers jumped out, weapons drawn, rushing toward us. "Unit 324, one of them yelled. "What the hell happened?" I shielded the child with one arm and stood unsteadily, pointing at the house. "She's here," I rasped. "In the basement. Something. You need to see." They hurried to the front door. I watched, chest heaving, as they breached it with handheld lights, their radios crackling. In the glare of their beams, the house's features softened, ordinary wood and plaster. But its presence still felt malevolent, as though it had just swallowed my soul. An ambulance pulled up moments later. Medics bundled the girl onto a stretcher, wrapping her in blankets. She looked at me once, eyes wide and ancient, and whispered, "Thank you." Then she was gone, sucked into the maw of the back of the ambulance, doors slamming shut. I followed at a staggered pace, answering questions. One officer snapped photos of the mud-caked hatch behind me. The forensics team scuttled from room to room inside the house. But in the noise, I heard nothing but my own ragged breathing and the distant echo of that girl's wail. Hours later, in the ER hallway, the child lay under fluorescent lights, her eyes closed as monitors beeped. A doctor told me she'd been in shock, but physically uninjured. The hospital staff wouldn't talk about why she was alone on Hollow Creek Road, why no missing child report matched her description. She'd given only one detail. "They promised me family." I stepped outside into pre-dawn quiet. Thin drizzle misted the parking lot. I pulled my service revolver from its holster, my backup weapon, and held it in my hand. It felt real, loaded, reliable. My backup Glock had jammed. This was the only firearm I could trust now. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no dispatch notifications. Only the time, 5:17 a.m. The day shift would be here soon. I slid the revolver into my coat pocket and leaned against the hospital wall, head bowed. My radio crackled once, a static hiss that made my spine go cold. Then dispatch. "Unit 324, are you there? Please respond." Relief flooded me. I keyed the mic. 324 here. Situation under control." My voice sounded distant, hollow. "Dispatch, do you read?" No answer, just static. I clicked off the radio. The sky lightened to steel gray. Rain slicked the pavement, running in rivulets toward the storm drains. I looked up at the hospital windows, then across the lot at my cruiser, headlights still on. In the seat lay something small, half hidden by the center console. A tiny shoe, muddy and half torn at the sole. My breath caught. I reached for it. When I picked it up, a chill raced through my bones. The shoe was ice cold, though the morning air was warm. And inside, pressed into the insole, I saw scrawled in dried blood, "Will you come back?" My hand shook violently, and I dropped the shoe. It skittered across the pavement, coming to rest at the curb. I stared at it as if it held the answer to every question. Behind me, the hospital doors hissed open. A nurse poked her head out. "Officer, we need your statement about the child." I turned slowly, then walked toward the entrance, every step heavier than the last. Rain pelted my uniform, beads of water dripping from my hair. As I reached the sliding doors, they closed behind me with a soft click, and I heard it then fade through the glass. The unmistakable, endless hum of a dial tone. Would I ever escape the house that demanded my return? If you made it this far, thank you for staying with me until the end. I hope the stories gave you something to think about or dream about. Sleep well, stay safe, and don't forget to subscribe. Good night.